Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Monday, December 6th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Rose Bowl is in 26 days, the game against Michigan in 356 days. As we expected yesterday, Ohio State is now officially headed to the Rose Bowl to play Utah. The Buckeyes finished sixth in the final college football playoff rankings. They have now finished in the top 7 of the playoff rankings in every season since the college football playoff started in 2014. But for the first time since 2018, they're not in the top 4, which is kind of the biggest thing that you would want to be in. So with them outside of that top 4, playing a Rose Bowl game, there's a lot to talk about. This is a really intriguing matchup with Utah. It is obviously a bowl game with a lot of historical significance. And yet there felt like there might be some selling involved when Ryan Day met with the media on Sunday. Tony Gerdeman joins me. For the first time since the Michigan game, Ryan Day did talk to the media on Sunday. We've watched a lot of these press conferences over the years, the Selection Sunday press conference with Urban Meyer and Ryan Day, and sometimes it's the hooray, we made it press conference, and sometimes it's the aw shucks, we didn't make it press conference. But those are just like generally like one tone or the other. This was a little different though to me. The post Michigan loss press conference, we have not seen that before in the college football playoff era. Did that strike you as, a little bit different from previous years from when they've missed the playoff?
Yeah, it did. And I think maybe even in past years where they haven't made it, there's almost somewhat of an angry tone as well, where this was just we're not over Michigan yet. And yeah, not making the playoffs that's the goal, is to make the playoffs. But you could tell Day was still affected by the loss to Michigan and just dealing with that hurt and everything that came with it, which is, well, now you need so much help to get to the playoffs that it's very unlikely. And of course it didn't happen. And so, yeah, it still seemed like you're processing what happened. And let's be honest, it's not fixed. So there's still a concern there. And maybe that is getting over into how he's answering things and just the overall tone, the overall mood. It's you're just little over a week out from what happened in that game, and you're trying to get back to the drawing board, but you're probably going to have different coaches actually doing that in some form or fashion, to where how much can be fixed at this point. I know they feel he seemed to think they can get things fixed and righted because they have been able to stop the run in the past this year at times. But yeah, just a tone of somber, or certainly not as excited as you've seen coaches who are going to be going to the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, the Rose Bowl, when Urban Meyer talked about the Rose Bowl, it was, this like he talked about with this something he's just wanted to do his whole career, is coaching the Rose Bowl, and this was his final game at Ohio State, and what an incredible way to go out. That Ryan Day kind of said most of the correct words in some order, like, lots of guys have coached here and lots of guys have played here, and it's a really historic game and it's a really traditional thing. And there was not the reverence that you heard from Urban Meyer. You mentioned the coaching staff changes. So let's talk about the coaching staff changes. He was asked very directly, like, about changes he was potentially going to make. It feels like there is changes in the air, shall we say, that, it feels like some things are probably in the process of happening or will be in the process of happening. He was asked about that on Sunday. What did he have to say?
Well, Tom, I don't really want to talk about that. I just want to talk about the bowl game, the Rose Bowl, and sending the players out on a positive note. I don't really want to get into anything like that.
Mm.
That was
yes. I got it.
Yeah, and it was, and and people tried, and it started off with like, I know you don't want to talk about the coaching changes, but are you set on making coaching changes? Like, we're not asking, do you know who your defensive coordinator is going to be, but are you going to have a new defensive coordinator? Thinking, I got him now. He's going to have to give me the answer now. And of course, Tom, I really don't want to talk about any coaching stuff. I'd rather talk about the Rose Bowl. Thank you.
Yeah, Ryan Day is clever enough to not step in that particular bear trap. Unsurprisingly, the last time you and I were out covering a Rose Bowl in Pasadena, it was the transition from Urban Meyer to Ryan Day, and I remember sitting at the media days and asking all sorts of Ohio State assistant coaches, "So have you heard? Are you back next year? Are you planning to be back next year?" And pretty much everyone said, "Yeah, yeah, planning." I mean, as far as I know, I'm coming back next year, and not all of those gentlemen were back the next year. So, yeah, go ahead.
You know who else promised to be back that year and didn't? Tate Martell.
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah, that's true. That was a memorable. Kendall Sheffield talked for the first and last time at that Rose Bowl media day. Like that was a very memorable media day. Sometimes these are kind of very dry pro forma affairs. That was a memorable one. Alex Grinch did everything but say, like, no, I'm not coming back next year. No, why would you ask me that? Yeah, so that was an interesting one. We will perhaps get a chance to have those same conversations in just a few weeks at Rose Bowl Media Day in lovely Pasadena, California. One of the questions that's sort of lingering, though, Ohio State has not really had to deal with this in recent years. When you're playing in the college football playoff, this is not an issue. When you're not in the college football playoff, we get to start talking about opt-outs. And the first major one that Ohio State had to deal with was Denzel Ward in the Cotton Bowl in 2017. It's entirely possible that you may have another one to possibly more than that this year for the Rose Bowl. So, what did Ryan Day have to say? He was asked how many guys have opted out. Has anyone opted out yet? What did he have to say about that? And how many people do you think we're really potentially talking about here?
Yeah, nobody has opted out yet, and he at this point said he's not really expecting any, but will also talk with players about that if somebody comes to him. In terms of like who it would be, I think the two most obvious guys are Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, because right now those are the two highest guys on all of the mock draft boards that you'll see. And I think they're certainly the two most prominent draft prospects. So if you're not in a playoff, you just figure, don't be surprised if it happens. But Chris Olave he's on the cusp of 1,000-yard season of other records. Garrett Wilson has an opportunity to maybe continue to move up the draft boards. They both do. So there's been no indication that at this point that those guys will opt out, but still, like that, they fit the profile in terms of draft picks and bowl games. Defensively or offensive line, like I don't know where you would necessarily see any others at this point, because nobody should be so sure of their draft position defensively or on the offensive line that they can sit this one out. I've seen Nick Petit-Frere's name, at like top 20, top 25 in terms of the first round, which is generally certainly a pretty good projection. I don't know if that's his actual NFL grade, but that's a guy who also could, but his last game being that Michigan game where the Michigan defensive line was pressuring CJ Stroud on 45% of his dropbacks. I think maybe he'd want to go out with a bigger bang than that one. And so I kind of would expect him back, and I don't really expect anybody to be opting out to leave early for the NFL from the defense.
Yeah, I couldn't really come up with anyone on that side of the ball that would make sense, that their draft stock is so fantastic that they'd be in line to do that. And that NFL draft, putting out that one last game of good film for the NFL, like that is certainly a good motivation to go into the game with. But the motivation for kind of the rest of the team is a little bit of a question right now as well. This is Utah's first Rose Bowl. It is entirely possible that this will be Kyle Whittingham's final game as Utah head coach. There's been retirement rumors swirling about him, so this could be a go out on top, emotional final game for him, to get carried off the field at the Rose Bowl. Utah could be playing for a lot of stuff here. This is, again, we talked about the tone of Ryan Day's press conference. Like, this is not what Ohio State had in mind 2 weeks ago as far as where they would be headed in the postseason. So motivation sounds like it could be an issue for Ohio State. And when you look at what Utah has done to Oregon a couple times in the last few weeks, not being motivated might not go real well for Ohio State. So where does Ohio State look to find motivation for this game, beyond just the putting out good NFL film?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think the even with Ryan Day's tone, it's like now though you now have an opponent that you can focus on. Like before today, they didn't, and so that's the emotion of the team. But now you would hope uh, that he would hope that the culture, the wanting to play for the seniors, wanting to send them all out, they all have. He also said, these guys all have pride in themselves and certainly don't want to go out with two losses in a row. And I think once they start watching tape of Utah, they'll either be like, well, we better get ready, or they're going to be like, oh, I do not want to deal with this. Yeah, no, Utah is not the biggest name, not the brightest lights. But I think once they start watching the film, they'll realize like we better be ready or this could be bad. And then it comes down to your culture. Like, how are you going to respond to that? Are you going to get ready or are you going to fold? And really, from what we have seen from Ohio State over the years, they're not that type. They're not a Miami, a Florida, or like somebody that's like, I don't want to have anything to do with this. You would think that just because we are all trying to project maybe some of our feelings or some of other people's feelings like, gosh, isn't it too bad you guys could be playing somebody better than Utah? Like, I don't know that maybe the Buckeyes feel like that until they start watching the tape and then they start to realize, okay, this is serious. This is not Air Force. This is not, BYU or like just not, I don't even want to shortchange BYU. It's like, this is not some small school thing. This is going to be a physical battle. And if you are already dismissive and then you start getting pushed around, that's a hard switch to turn on and to stop from just getting rolled down a hill. So I think they're going to show them. They're going to show the coaches will show the Buckeyes like as much, I guess, I don't know, violence, line of scrimmage violence from Utah and film that they can, so that they can get their attention and let them know that if you do have pride, you don't want to get embarrassed, and this team can embarrass you.
Yeah, the Utah brand might not necessarily be something that turns a lot of heads in Columbus, but the Utah film, if you've watched that team play, like they are going to mash your face in. That is what they do. They're going to run the ball. They're going to play really good physical defense. They do not look like a team that is a lot of fun to play. You would think that would get Ohio State players' attention. If nothing else, that should be enough to get Ohio State players' attention relatively quickly and provide sufficient motivation for this game if nothing else works. One thing that it was kind of an interesting angle that someone asked about on Sunday was Ryan Day normally the week after the Michigan game is preparing for the Big Ten championship game. Last week, rather notably, he was not, which allowed him to actually do something he does not normally get to do during that week, which could potentially have some positive long-term impacts for Ohio State. So, Tony, what did Ryan Day get to do last week?
You got to go out on the road and recruit and try to wrap up some tough battles. And it's going to be there will be some battles down the stretch with different recruits. And so he was able to get some face-to-face time and some home visits, and you got to use those wisely. You only get the head coach gets one, and so you got to use it at the right time. And he finally had a block of time to go ahead and do that. That's something that he has not ever done before as the Ohio State head coach, and there were none last year. And the year before that, he was in the playoffs, and so it's not like he was just sitting home. So this was an opportunity for him to just try to close, because it's an advantage that he has not had. Other teams have used it to their advantage because he's been busy, so he's not been able to do that in terms of he's been preparing for the playoffs, or preparing for the Big Ten championship game rather. So now that wasn't on his to-do list this past week, he was out on the road, but also said, I'd rather not be out on the road. I'd rather be preparing for the Big Ten championship game. And, obviously he's going to be trying to get back there, but we'll see if it helps, because they're on a bunch of, head-to-head battles with some significant schools and some hometown kids from out of state. And where it's hard to pull those guys out of state, and so you got to do your best and take your biggest last swing.
Well, while Ryan Day is shifting back from recruiting mode to game prep mode now, Tony and I will be shifting into game prep mode or game pre-game mode, or whatever you want to call it, for the next few weeks as we get ready to head into the Rose Bowl. Tony and Kevin Noon and I did about an hour and a half of a live show on YouTube on Sunday afternoon after all those bowl pairings got announced, talking about the Rose Bowl, talking about some of the other college football playoff stuff going on, giving you some thoughts on the season on the whole, general direction of the program, and much more. You can find that on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Buckeye Scoop, or you can find it on the Buckeye Weekly stream on your podcast app of choice. That will dropped on Sunday, so you can search that and listen to that if you prefer. Hopefully that will make your Monday morning commute a little more entertaining for you. And we should have plenty more coverage coming up all this week and throughout the month leading up to the Rose Bowl. There's also early signing day coming. It should be a very busy and very entertaining month, and maybe a trip to California. How about that? Not so bad to end the year and ring in 2022. So hope you can enjoy all of that stuff and stick with us through what should be a very fun month. So that'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.